From the 809 Restaurant and Lounge in the heart of Inwood, New York City, welcome to Inwood Artworks On Air, where we meet the musicians, filmmakers, writers, theater makers, and artists of all stripes who make their home in what we affectionately call Upstate Manhattan. I'm your host, Aaron Sims, and today we're turning our spotlight on professional actor and stuntman, Calvin Ahn. After graduating from Oberlin College, Calvin moved to New York City to pursue a career in performing arts. He immersed himself in studying stage combat, film combat, and has trained in martial arts for 20 years. He holds a black belt in Tae Kwon Do and has studied Kajukenbo, a traditional northern Shaolin Kung Fu, and Jeet Do. He currently is an instructor in JKD and Kungfu in New York City, as well as a NASM-certified personal trainer. As an actor, he has studied the Meisner technique at the Neighborhood Playhouse and the Barrow Group, and studied film acting at Stella Adler. He has appeared on such shows as Law & Order SVU, Late Night with Conan O'Brien and Gotham. As a stuntman, he has appeared on such shows as Cobra Kai, Lovecraft Country, FBI, and many others. We're going to talk to him about acting, fighting, and so much more. But first, Calvin, welcome to Inwood Artworks On Air. It's great to see you.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Absolutely. How are you hanging in there, man? Just want to check in with you first.
It is cold out there today. Did you notice that? Like, today feels like the first real day of winter.
Maybe you should wear a sweater or something.
I should. You told me to look nice,
like
and
you're
I decided
wearing,
to go.
Just for for those who aren't watching the video version of it, Calvin's in here with a rolled-up sleeve shirt, no undershirt, like open collar. It's like it's like spring for you.
He told me to look nice. This is how I think nice looks. So yeah.
You look nice anytime, my friend.
Oh, thank you, sir. Thank you.
Good to see you. But no wonder you're cold.
Yeah.
But anyway, well, it's unmistakable from the path you have chosen that you have two major passions. Or so it seems. Mm-hmm. The performing arts and martial arts.
Yes.
I'm curious, which emerged first?
Martial arts was the first thing to emerge because I was bullied a lot as a child. So eventually I reached the point where I didn't want to be bullied anymore. So I decided to take up Tae Kwon Do, and from there just kind of spiraled into a lifelong path and goal that kind of led me to where I am now. So, yeah.
How old were you then?
I was 15.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So like the middle school, high school age. Going into that. Yeah.
Not exactly the most popular kid in school, so being bullied a lot wasn't a really big fun thing. And then just, one day I decided I need to do something different, change things. So,
yeah. Good for you.
Yeah, thanks.
I'm always excited to hear about the types of martial arts that people are interested in and the different disciplines people are practicing. And you have a great experience in three. You said Tae Kwon Do, is it Kajukenbo? Is that how you say it?
Kajukenbo, yeah.
Kajukenbo, excuse me. And Jeet Do. So could you first give a bit of background on each to our listeners? And if you would share how each of these have informed you in your personal life, in your professional life too.
Sure. Tae Kwon Do was my first base art, is a Korean martial art based primarily focusing on kicking with a little bit of punching here and there. But it's a dynamic style. Basically, it's very showy. You can show a lot of flair. There are a lot of spinning kicks, a lot of jump kicks and all that. So as a kid growing up, you're just like, ooh, I want to be able to do that stuff. And so different from other sports like, say, football or baseball, it was just like more of a unique opportunity to focus on self-development and work on yourself as a person and individual. So yeah, that got me all the way up through junior high, high school, into college, and to where I am now. Kaji Kempo was an art I studied back in college. It's a Hawaiian martial art. Some people even say it's the world's first mixed martial art, because basically 4 masters in Hawaii derived from karate, judo, jiu-jitsu, kempo, which is a Chinese Kung Fu style, and boxing, American and Chinese boxing, which is Kung Fu. And they all decided to come together back in the 40s and 50s and compare their styles and compare the best parts of each style. And the way they go about testing the effectiveness of it, they would go into the slums of Hawaii and get into bar fights and try to figure out to see, does this move work? Does this move work? This one does, this one doesn't. All right, let's get rid of that. We'll keep this one. And then it just kind of spiraled and snowballed into something bigger as time went on. Unfortunately, we don't have schools here in the city to further pursue it, but I do miss it and all that. I still practice it every now and then. And what was the third one? JKD? Jeet Do?
Jeet Do, yeah.
Yeah, Jeet Do is Bruce Lee's martial art. It was his own personal expression of how he thought the martial arts go about. Some would even say he's considered the father of mixed martial arts today, MMA. But yeah, Bruce Lee was a childhood idol of mine and hero to look up to, male role model, if you will. And yeah, it was a style I always wanted to study, and I found a school here about 10, 11 years ago, and been training there ever since.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah, thank you.
And so those bullies haven't come around in a while, I take it.
Not so much. So
I would think not.
it's a good thing, though.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, going in towards your with that firm base in your personal life, do you remember the first time you merged your martial arts with the acting? Do you remember when that was?
I know exactly when that was. That was the winter term of my sophomore year at college. I was just exposed to acting at that point, but I didn't really have a full grasp on the technique of it or how to go about doing it. And I originally studied method acting, and it just went right over my head. I didn't really understand. It's like, my life is not that interesting. I don't have that much sense memory to really delve off of. It's like, okay. But my first stage combat teacher here in New York came out to my school and did a winter workshop on stage combat. And from there I realized there's sword fighting in the theater, and I can go about mixing martial arts with acting and performing. And it was just like, yeah. And so from there, after that winter workshop, I continued to study with her in New York for about 6-7 years after that. And from there, I managed to transition from, college into the theater world here by focusing on the stage combat aspect.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, theater happens in the moment, as you know, and film happens after the editing bay is piecing it together.
Yeah.
Aside from the differences in how the content is put together, could you talk to me and our listeners a little about the delineation of how stage combat is created versus how it is created for film and television?
Okay. Stage combat for theatrical purposes, the theater anyway, it's designed to be as flashy and showy as possible, because you have to cater not only to the people in the front row, but to all the people in the nosebleed sections of the theater as well. So they have to be able to see all the action and whatnot going on stage. And a good choreographer will be able to tell a story through the motion, so it's not just two actors waving sword props around trying to look like they know what they're doing. Usually a good choreographer will be able to manage to tell the story through the violence itself. And by making the movements as big and showy as possible, it can reach not only the people in the front row, but the people all the way in the back to really understand what story is being told from the action. It's not just acting, fight scene, back to acting. If anything, the fight scene should help contribute the intensity and progression of the story, if done well. And so from there, transitioning into film and television, everything has to be more compact because you're playing more to a smaller dimension, whether it's like a widescreen TV or a small TV, but the movement has to be captured very specifically on camera. But because the camera is mainly stacked up in a two-dimensional world, you can easily have certain techniques translate where you don't actually have to make contact with a person, whereas like on the theater stage, everything has to be more precisely mapped out, but you can get away with so much more because you have more space and room to maneuver.
Well, you've had experience in both mediums, and given the preciseness of film and television versus the, we'll say, the grandeur of theater, but yet still precise, obviously. And you've had an array of roles that you've played in your life that have given you the opportunity to practice both. A few, if I remember from following your career, that as I have, you played Macduff in the Pan-Asian rep Shogun Macbeth, Aramis in the Inwood Shakespeare Festival's Three Musketeers, which are both fighting roles, I'll say. Performed stunts in the Daredevil series, John Wick 2, among many others, digitally. So do you recall particular combat sequences on stage or screen that was particularly challenging to execute for those reasons you're telling me? Because you're not just learning the moves and to execute them, but you're also understanding how they're going to be communicated to an audience.
Yeah, in certain shows, let's say Gotham, for instance, there was one time I had to execute a certain fight scene with one of the main actors, and because of time crunching and also just weather conditions, we were kind of rushed for time, and so trying to execute certain simple movements on any other day, which would be probably easier to pull off. This particular day was a little bit more difficult just because depending on where the camera was, you had to be very, very specific in not only just a reaction, but also where your attack was. And so certain days, some days you hit the nail right on the head and just be like, all right, 1 or 2 takes, boom, you get it. Other days you just have to focus down and just find that patience to be like, all right, I'm not getting this. How do I adjust this? Where's the camera? Trying to take into account that with film and TV, you always have to account for where the camera is. It's not just with the audience in theater. You can just let it go and just hope for the best. With film and TV, you have to be very, very specific. So,
given that specificity, is there one stunt or fight in particular that comes to mind you remember completing and being crunched for time or whatever reasons? Film and TV industry, for people should know, it's always about how much time you have on set to accomplish so many things. I'm just curious that if you ever walked away one day going, wow, I'm lucky that didn't go another way.
Yeah, actually, I'm not going to name the show, but there was one particular show that I had to do that involved a fight scene, and I almost lost an eye.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so initiating was starting off a fight with one of the actors, and I had to adjust for the camera, and unfortunately, and this probably was my fault, I didn't tell the actor at the same time that I was adjusting for the camera, and so one thing led to another. I got a weapon where probably, I got very lucky. It just didn't really hit me straight on in my eye, but just low enough that, caused a little bit of a scratch and required a couple stitches, but for the most part, got a liquid bandage on it and managed to finish out the rest of the day. So the director and the cast and crew were very happy about that because they're just like, we don't want to have to come back here. It's just like, all right, just tape it up and let's finish it off. And so
rub some dirt on it and walk it off.
Exactly. We did it, and the director was very thankful. He was like, thank you so much for finishing this. And I was like, yeah, you're welcome. But, yeah.
Well, I'm curious with those listen, I'm being a producer myself. We always want to get the job done. I totally understand. I also have an acting background. I've played every position on the field, so to speak, on stage and off. I'm curious if you think times are going to change because of COVID, and only because it's not about disease, so to speak. It's about precautions and health and safety. Yes, sure, about being feverish or being symptomatic, but I think it's also going to bring in a different kind of awareness to sets, backstage and on stage and on screen. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, right now there are productions going on in New York. I think outside the city that are managing to make production still work. The only downside is because of COVID, the number of stunts and the amount of stunts they can do and the type of stunts they can do is actually pretty severely limited, I think, at least from my current knowledge. Whether or not things come back, I'm optimistic, and I'd like to say yes, because with the vaccine, hopefully, people will be able to be in close quarters with each other and not have to worry about the slight case of death coming down just in case they get coughed on or breathed on by someone who happens to be infected and all that. Of course, they're also now with the multiple variants going out of the world right now, we have to take that into consideration. So to fully answer your question, I'm optimistic as to whether it'll happen this year or in the next couple of years. I hope so, but I'm not so sure.
Well, it's yet to be seen, of course. But there is. But I was thinking. I was just looking for a silver lining there. Hopefully, that if something good can come out of this, is that maybe there are more precautions for film and television and theater that will aid in the execution of making a safer workplace all around because of what's had to happen because of the pandemic. But yeah, listen, they used to close the plays houses all the time, and the James the First, Shakespeare and the Jacobean era, and they didn't have Netflix.
Yeah,
they didn't have their PDA devices and and it's at least we have a lot of great content to keep us all hopefully on our toes. And
Absolutely.
and like I said, it's been such a great do-it-yourself culture. And but speaking of creating content, although it was filmed a while ago, you worked on the recently premiered episode and season of Cobra Kai,
Oh, yeah.
the third season, which came out like this.
January 1st, I think,
recording this
actually.
in January, so
Yeah.
the end of January here. So it came out in January. What was that experience like to record it so long ago and see it like now?
It's a little surreal, because considering the fact that it was 2 years ago that we shot it, was in the summer of 2019, and so 2020 has gone by. It really feels like the blink of an eye, even though
Sure.
nothing really much happened this past year. But yeah, originally I thought I was going down just to work as a regular stunt person, just taking hits from the major actors and all that, and trying to sell the hits and whatnot, help contribute to the story. And I didn't find out till I got on the plane what the contract was and who I was actually doubling for. So I was like, oh, well, that's exciting. And so getting down there, it was great to work with the actors, great to work with the stunt coordinator and whatnot. And it didn't really dawn on me till after the whole shoot finished. Was just like, I actually got to work with two actors that I grew up watching as a child, like on the big screen, like Karate Kid Part 2. And like these were major movies that helped define part of my childhood. It was kind of like, ooh, karate, that's pretty cool. And then to have him go to Okinawa, it's just like, oh wow, now he's in a different country, and oh, there's a bad guy, oh, he kind of looks like me, and oh, he's kicking his butt and all that. And so it was a little bit surreal just having to encounter these actors now and currently where I am now, and just seeing like the whole journey from where I was as a kid to now. It was just
Well,
it was surreal.
the reason why I bring it up too, and I think you should say their names just so you like the character was chosen,
Chosen, yeah.
right? And then of course Ralph Macchio is the Karate Kid himself, Daniel, who you worked with. The reason why I wanted to bring it up because I thought it's such a great full circle moment for you when you said you started at 15 learning martial arts to escape bullies, and Karate Kid is all about escaping bullies, standing up for who you are, finding your identity, and standing up for yourself. And I think I was very, very proud of you, and as thought it was amazing that you got to be able to fulfill that childhood dream,
Thanks,
and it is kind of quite personal significance to you, but also a great professional accomplishment.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it is a great professional accomplishment. I just trying to just be humbled by it and just grateful for the opportunity and all that. So yeah. And then with COVID here now, it's just that ever lingering thought. It's like, will I get to work again? And
Well, what have you been doing now to keep your head above water during COVID? I mean, it's been challenging for everyone, and I think it's worth to be said, for a little bit of context as well, that there is no live theater, there is no live concert series. At least there's not supposed to be. And exactly. You can't attend anything in person because of the significance of possibly hurting someone else and infecting them, and also taking care of yourself too. So our entire industry has been wiped out. We're doing this. I'll just say again, thanks to our local supporting for our local small businesses, and we're doing this to support local artists and give some renown to these small businesses who are struggling to stay afloat because it's a do-it-yourself culture right now. And so, what are you doing to keep yourself in business?
One big help since the city's opened back up has been training for myself. I always had the philosophy of never stop learning, never stop training. So in regards to training, that involves reading up on acting techniques, studying cinematography books, going to the gym, working on my own physical self and my mental health and whatnot. And basically focusing on trying to become a better version of myself with each passing day. And it really has helped me just maintain a sense of like purpose during this whole dark time, because I have friends who've basically kind of felt like adrift at sea with COVID because their job no longer exists, or they can't work, or they have families to feed, or they have, dreams that they have to like put on hold just due to, life in general. But Yeah, for me personally, it's just having something that I can focus on to help better improve myself has really made a huge difference on my own physical and mental health. And I think actually I feel better than I did probably a year ago, considering the fact that, we've been isolated for so long, or most of us anyway.
Well, I think both acting and martial arts are great discipline builders. And for those of you who haven't followed a career in the arts, let me tell you, you have to have incredible amount of determination and discipline to still be here. And you've had a career for over 20 years now in show business, let it be said.
Wow, yeah.
And which is incredibly commendable. So what have the key choices in your life been that you've made in sustaining yourself, both mentally and financially, we'll say?
Yeah.
But it plays into, like, it's an identity question too, I have to say. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Basically, I've been working as a professional actor since I was 22, and I didn't actually rely solely on acting, at least for a while, until I was 26 up until my early 30s and all that. And what it taught me was just the importance of not only like having routines, rituals that like help keep you focused throughout the day, also learning what are the priorities in your life. Like, do you really need to buy that movie? Do you really need to, buy that jacket, whatever, for,
Because
improving your
sometimes
social life?
things get lean.
Yes, exactly. So you learn how to focus on what's really important, having a roof over your head, having food in your stomach, and maintaining your physical and mental health. Those were my main priorities. And so, yeah, I learned early on just trying to be as frugal as possible while maintaining a life in the arts was the best way to go about trying to be successful, because when there are good times, it's good. When there are lean times, you better learn how to make them last and figure out your way through them, because eventually it'll get better. But, having those lean times and having gone through those times, it makes you fully appreciate the better times. But, you don't lose that knowledge of what to do and how to survive during those lean times.
Right. Well, like I said, it's incredibly self-disciplined of you to say that. And I think coming out of these lean times, I sure as heck hope that greener pastures on the horizon for us all, with new energy behind racial equality, the election of a new president, the hypersensitivity I will see of studios and networks and theater companies. They seem to be focused on ramping up again production. They're just waiting for the green light, and they want to focus on diversity and multiculturalism, and also hopefully with tax cuts for doing more local work here in New York City.
Absolutely.
So do you feel the steps that you see are being taken, and the ones are hopefully in motion that are going to translate into more job opportunities in the industry for actors and stunt people of color and Asian descent?
Absolutely. I think because every culture, every group, every ethnic group has stories to tell. And so the more you diversify and get these people's stories and opportunities to showcase them, not only in film and TV, but also on stage, I think there's just a plethora of great content out there that's just waiting to be created. And just, limiting yourself to like one, aspect of it, of like, just telling one certain group of stories and be like, yeah, but this is tried and true. We know that these stories, will bring in, money or box office, whatever. But it's like, no, it's like we're at this point now where everyone has such a wide verse of stories to tell. And like our business is all about storytelling. So why not hear what other people have to offer in regards to like their stories? You like learn something else that you never knew before, and it'd be like, wow, I never knew that. That is so interesting. I'd like to learn more about that. And so diversity, I'm all for it. I just think as long as there are storytellers out there to tell these stories, I think we're a great boon of material to come out in the near future, which hopefully will happen sooner rather than later.
Amen to that.
So yeah.
Are there any particular stories you're interested in telling?
I have stories that I'd like to tell from a stunt perspective, but it's all a matter of also just trying to get people together and also learning the cinematography and also the film language, if you will, of shooting this stuff, because I could bring in other people, but learning how to do this by myself and having quarantine time to actually take the time to learn all this, it feels better. So yeah.
Awesome. And can you talk a little bit about what that language is, that stuntman language? Because it's different language than being doing theater language.
It is different, but stuntman language is essentially just film language. So learning how to tell a story, not just through verbal dialogue, but with the action or the dynamic motions of the people performing them on camera. And so, like, stunt acting, stunt fighting is no different than regular film acting or even stage acting or stage combat for the most part. As long as you're telling a story that helps contribute another aspect of the storytelling dialogue and drives the story forward, then you're doing your job right. So,
and I think it's smart of you to say that, and I wanted to reinforce it with that question because at the end of the day, it's all about moving the story forward.
Of course.
It's not a insertion of action for action's sake. Well, we hope not. Sometimes you watch the movie, they miss the boat on that.
Yeah, sometimes.
Or play too, for that matter. But it's worth saying and repeating. That's why I brought it up again. Is that we are storytellers fundamentally, and it's like, what part of the story is the audience going to understand by doing this to this person at this time in this context? And I think that's important for people to know, that it's if the motions of what you're doing tell that story, you're in good shape. Well, do you have any parting words of advice to anyone who wants to break into the stunt industry but doesn't know where to begin?
I would say focus on learning movement training, whether it's dance or martial arts. Take an acting class. Learning how to perform on camera. Learning how to perform on camera, but learning how to say lines truthfully and spontaneous. Showing spontaneity on the spot is always a really good thing. Never stop training. Yeah, don't think that just because you studied at a renowned acting studio that all of a sudden that you don't have to train anymore, or just think that just because you got a black belt in whatever martial art means you don't have to train anymore. All the greats, whether they're great actors or great stunt people, the great stunt people are constantly training nonstop when they're not working. And so that's something I strive to equal myself as much as I can. But yeah, just keep training. Never stop learning.
Those are great parting words of advice.
Thank
Calvin,
you.
It's been such a pleasure having you here, man. It's great seeing you again.
Great seeing you again, man. Thanks for having me.
Sure thing. Thank you so much. Is there a place that people can go to learn more about your work and keep up with you?
Social media, Facebook, Instagram. I don't have a webpage, unfortunately, but maybe this year I will remedy that.
But you have an IMDb page, right?
Oh, IMDb page, yes. Just look up Calvin Ahn on IMDb, and you'll find all my credits there.
There you go, folks. Well, listeners, go to IMDb and see and watch all things Calvin Ahn. Thanks again, Calvin, for joining me on this Artist Spotlight episode of Inwood Artworks On Air. It's where we meet the musicians, filmmakers, writers, theater makers, and artists of all stripes who make their home here in Upper Manhattan. If you have a moment, please show us some love right now by rating and reviewing this podcast on Apple Podcasts. It really does help. Deep thanks here to our friends at 809 Restaurant and Lounge on the heart of Dykeman Street for hosting us. It's really wonderful to have this kind of local support, and we're happy to support them. Thanks to Janine McAdam and HeightSites.com for local uptown promotional support. Be sure to follow them and us on social media. You can follow us at inwoodartworks.nyc to keep up with all that we do online, which we do the Inwood Film Festival, Filmworks Al Fresco, pop-up art galleries, live performances, and so much more. You can support us and all our free programming by making a tax-free donation at inwoodartworks.nyc/donate. And Inwood Artworks On Air is made possible with funding from the NISCA Electronic Media and Film Grant Program in partnership with Wave Farm Media Arts Assistance Fund and the support of Governor Andrew Cuomo and the New York State Legislature. Thanks also to NYC and Company Foundation with support from Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer. This is Aaron Sims for Inwood Artworks